Hello, tonight I'm going to read you Blossom of Tupek, a story by me, Emma Loda. Every home in Tupek had a dart rifle, a fire pit, and woolen blankets. Say sat in silence by the fire, brushing the wool of her pet as Viv stirred a pot of boiling grain and spices. Viv had tried to start a conversation with her sister as she cooked, but Say said nothing. The sun had set half an hour before, and their brother, Dex, was still not home from work. Say knew why, but stared at the orange flames licking the pot and said nothing to Viv as she poured a ladle full of spiced grain into 3 bowls and looked out the window, still waiting for Dex. She did not know about their fight. That morning began like any other. Viv rose at dawn and left for the greenhouse, and Dex took Say to the counting house. He was manager there, and it was his job to keep inventory of crops. Dex agreed to train Say to keep inventory since she was no longer allowed to work in the orchards. Most nymphs, or females, worked in the gleeberry orchards, picking fruit and keeping pests off the trees. After an argument over who pruned which tree escalated between Say and one of her peers, the other nymph ended up getting pushed off the tree. She survived, but the village elders ruled that Say would not be allowed to work in the orchards anymore. Dex entered his office, a simple room with clay walls, and took his counter tool down. It had a wooden bar at the top with strings hanging down, each representing a numerical place, ones, tens, hundreds, etc. For each applicable number was a bead tied into the strings, a cross between an abacus and a kipu. Say followed, and her pet, Fip, bounded along behind her. Dex looked at the golnial skeptically as he preened his thick wool. Say had raised Fip from an egg and was in the process of training him to hunt, but compared to most other golnials he knew, Fip had a long way to go as far as obedience. Say assured Dex that nothing could go wrong. She would keep him on his leash in the office with a chew toy until her shift at the counting house was done. Then she'd take him hunting. Say wished he'd brought her poncho. The storeroom was cold to preserve the grain. It was called Kieviv, which in the Tunian language means ki, grain, of life, viv. Each bag in here weighs 60 kilos, says Dex, his voice echoing off the clay walls. Along these walls, he gestured to a shelf filled with bags of grain, is all of the grain harvested in the past week. Count each bag and note it, Dex instructed her, handing Say a beaded counter. Leave it in the office when you are finished. Dex noticed that Shay was shivering and shrugged off his own poncho, handing it to her. You need to come more prepared, he said, as she slipped it on. It hung past her knees. Dex left Say in the grain storeroom to make her tallies. It was dull work. Maybe Dex didn't mind it, but Say knew this is where he and the rest of the village wanted her, out of sight. She completed her counting in 2 hours. There's a total of 2,952 bags, that is 177,120 kilos of grain. She tied in the beads, recording the number, and carried the counter back to the office. The door was open, but Dex was not inside, and neither was Fip. The golnial's leash was still there, but Fip was no longer attached to it. The thick woven cord was frayed and tufts of yellow fiber scattered all over the floor. He chewed through another leash. Say looked underneath the desk and behind the cabinet. Fip? There was no bark or growl in reply. Say rubbed her antennae together, making a whistle in the frequency only a golnial can hear. Still, no answer. Stepping into the hallway, Say closed her eyes and spread her antennae. Then she felt one twitch, trembling in the direction behind her. She followed the detected frequency until she heard it with her rich ears. Coming from another storage room was the unmistakable sound of Fip gnawing on wood. Say stepped into the storeroom, one used to store dry gleeberry, sweetness berry, the fruit she was too familiar with from her days in the orchard. Only then they were still in their hard outer rind and could fit in the palm of her hand. Now shelled and dried, they were much smaller. She found Fip on a shelf, chewing on a wooden beam. He was 2 feet above her head. Say dragged a ladder over to the shelf, now at eye level with her golnial. She whistled to Fip again. His antennae perked up and he stopped gnawing. looking at Say with his shiny bug eyes, rough purple tongue protruding from his large mouth as he panted. "Fip, come." Fip felt Say's pink hands with his antennae. They tickled, but before she could grab him, the Golneel jumped over Say's head and onto the shelf across from her. The momentum from his leap caused that shelf, due to his damaged beam, to slide. Sacks of dried glebri fell, rupturing and spilling their contents upon impact. Say pushed her way onto the shelf, trying to keep any more from falling, yet trying to keep her eye on Fip. "What was that?" Someone's voice echoed from the other side of the storeroom. Say balanced on the ladder, feeling the sweat begin to bead. Fip, meanwhile, paced back and forth across the shelf, sniffing the bag with his antennae. He grabbed the cloth sack with his sharp front teeth. "Fip, no!" She let go of the shelf to make a lunge at Fip, but he was too quick. The Golneel wagged his curly tail, jumped onto the floor, and bounded out of her sight as half the shelf collapsed. "Up there!" someone shouted. Say looked down to see a brave with a mustard complexion grab hold of the ladder. She descended a few rungs and jumped down, her legs only absorbing half of the shock. The brave tried to stop her, grabbing her by the oversized poncho, but she shoved him off. He hit the clay floor, but Say did not stop to look, just kept running after Fip as he shook himself off and hopped out of the glebri storage room and down the hallway. Say heard more angry voices. Someone called for security, but she dared not look back. Adrenaline rushed through the nymph, but she wasn't one to get winded easily. She pulled off Dex's poncho mid-run and tried ensnaring Fip in it as he bounced off the walls and the heads of counters passing by, causing farmers delivering their yield to trip and even spill their grain as he ran underneath their legs. The chase continued until reaching a quieter spot by the padlocked door of a silo. Fip began to slow down. Say stopped running and watched as Fip, now at a dead end, hopped in circles. Then he rubbed his back against the wall, pushed against his cheeks with a large front paw until he spat out several dried glebri, which he had stored in his pouches. Fip began to nibble, acting as if Say wasn't there to see him eat a handful of what was normally a treat. Say took her chance. She tiptoed, her moccasin boots soundless, until she was a foot behind Fip. Then she pounced, trapping her pet in Dex's poncho. Fip struggled and growled, chattering his teeth in protest, but Say held on tight. The nymph's victory was short-lived, however, as two braves from the local militia appeared along with Dex. She didn't have to look to know he was present, as she could smell the familiar scent of balsam, sweat, and musty clay she associated with her brother. "Fip got loose," said Say, her gaze floorwards. "I see." Dex turned to the officers and told them that he could take the situation from there. He led Say back to the office and closed the door. "Say, put that little beast down and look up." The second Say looked Dex in the eye, she felt the blow. It almost knocked her over. She hissed. Had anyone else hit her, she would have struck back in a heartbeat, but there was a law in Tupek forbidding the assault of any family member with authority over you, and Dex was the oldest brave or male in Say's household. "Can I trust you with anything?" Dex shouted, the spots below his eyes turning a bright red. "For the past 2 years, Tupek, the country of fertile soil, has faced low yields at harvest time, and what do? You spill the fruits of our harvest." "I can help clean." "We have had enough of your help," Dex shouted, striking the desk. "Constant fighting in the orchards, nearly killing one of your peers. Working in the field, harvesting grain is out of the question because we do not trust you with a scythe. Had that nymph died, you would have been exiled or worse, never be recognized as a full member of our community. We are giving you second chance after second chance." "Say, but there are only so many chances you can receive. Today you lied about Fip being able to stay put. Knowing how energetic a Golneel can be, I expected the small office to be a mess, but escaping?" "I did not lie," Say said through her teeth. "I restrained him. Someone must have opened the door." "That is after he gnawed through his leash. Checking the durability of that leash was your responsibility. That little beast was your responsibility, and the mess inside the storehouse, you are responsible for it." "So I will clean it." Dex was silent for a moment. His spots cooled down from their bright red to their usual copper orange. "No," he said. "You do not want to be in that storehouse with all the other workers cleaning up. It may tempt them to take justice into their own hands, the way you always do at the drop of a leaf. You have tried our patience enough for one day, you and that little beast. I should have never given you permission." Still wrapped inside the poncho with only his snout poking out, Pip had stopped squirming, letting out a snore now and again. "You're responsible, then." It just slipped out of Say. Dex's large eyes narrowed. "You gave me permission. Even though you had doubts about my pet, you said yes." Dex kicked the office chair in Say's direction. Just missed her. "Blaming me now. Now I'm the fool to ruin Tupek." "If you let me bring Fip, knowing something could possibly go wrong, then yes. Had you said no, I would have never bought my pet." Avoiding responsibility like the typical half-grown nymph, especially one that takes on her Renukian heritage. "You are half Renukian too." Say glanced at the overturned chair, then back at her brother. "You're showing it right now." "Go home, Say." Dex turned his back, his fists clenching. "And when I say home, I mean home. Not hunting in the woods, not wandering through the village market, not bothering the nymphs at the orchard or Viv at the greenhouse. Home. If you are anywhere else but home, I will let the militia take you." Say took Fip, still in a bundle, and carried him out of the storage facility. The two officers escorted Say out of the clay building and down the blue-stoned road. They kept telling her to look down as she passed the vendors at the market, open to trade colorful Golnial wool blankets and fresh homegrown fruit, root vegetables and mushrooms for any goods worth their wares. A bag of seeds, a new pair of moccasins, an amber-plumed Teutoonian hen promised to lay daily. Say's antennae twitched, and in her mind's tongue she could taste the steam wafting from fresh gleeberry bread. This one, she knew, was better than the kind Viv made at home. It was spiced with bark from the solray tree. Another booth, canopied with a black and red woven tapestry. A brave was selling knives. What caught Say's eye were the spears which hung behind the table. The brave himself, Say could see, was Renukian. His rugged face and maroon complexion gave it away. He was from the same country as Say's father, the archipelago of islands southwest of Tupek, known for its warlike people. Say was not able to admire the spears for long enough before the militia officer forced her head forward so she could only see the ground beneath her. She continued, eyes downward, until they left her at the brick structure she called home. Fip, by this point, had fallen asleep. Say left him on his nest in the corner and prepared a fire for Viv, who began to cook immediately after hanging up her tasseled poncho. Say did not breathe a word to her, only went through the motions of assisting Viv with the chores, sweeping the kitchen floor, throwing any object in the broom's way aside. "How was work today?" Viv's antennae were perked up. She tossed spices into the water as she waited for it to boil. Say said nothing, but continued making noise as she went about. "Same old days," she murmured, placing a lid on the pot before glancing back to her sister as she finished sweeping, then threw the straw broom back into its corner before taking a seat in front of the fire pit, striped knees tucked. Viv walked over to her. "You don't look well." She extended an antenna, only to have Say slap it away. Viv's antennae drooped. She decided to let Say be and mind her cooking. Dex should return any moment. Viv looked out the window again, still anxious for Dex to appear. Then, finally, the familiar buzz of four wings signaled his arrival. Say bit her lip, picking Fip's shredded wool off the brush and tossing a clump of it into the fire, as Viv went outside to greet Dex as he dismounted from his Zuzi. Say stared at the fire as Dex dropped some bags at the door and took a deep drink from a flask of palm wine before strapping his dart rifle and marching towards Say. "Dex, what are you doing? No!" Viv yelled when she saw her brother pointing the muzzle at Say. "Whatever happened, we cannot—" "I'm not going to shoot her, you silly nymph. I'm going to shoot her little beast." Viv grabbed the muzzle of the rifle, forcing it downwards. Fip opened an eye and growled as Say pressed him tight and scurried to her feet. "What happened?" Dex lowered the weapon. "Get that thing out of my sight," he he said to Say. "Get it out of my sight!" Say ran to the stable behind their house and prepared a box of leaves for Viv to sleep in. She lingered outside, overhearing Dex and Viv's conversation. "It's the Ronukian blood that makes her crazy. She inherited the color and the bad temper. You never had problems with aggression." "Says the brave running at his own sister with a rifle. The Golniel made that mess in the storeroom, not Say. The both of you made a mistake bringing it. Don't you understand I am worried for Say? Next year she is to be initiated as a member of the community. She's already come of age when she can live separate from our parents. Finding a decent, brave, and Tupek willing to be her mate is too much to ask for at this rate. She hasn't been able to hold a job. If it was anyone else besides me as a manager, Say would have been turned out of another job. You live up to your name, Dex. You are always sure to tell the truth and deal with all things in justice. Say means blossom. I have worked with many flowers late to bloom. It took longer, yet they still blossomed. Our Say is like that. She will bloom. For all we know, had she been raised in our father's country, she would already be blooming there. We are measuring with Tupek's standards, after all." Viv handed Dex his bowl of spiced grain and hesitated before saying, "I meant to tell you this before. The other day I met a foreigner at the greenhouse who was not Tutunian. He was an extraterrestrial foreigner, a professor from Cistern." Dex bit his lip and stared at his bowl in thought. Say did not know what her sister was suggesting yet, but she knew that Dex was not trusting when it came to foreigners of any kind. "Viv, what have I told you about cultivating foreign plants on Tutunian soil? There are natural repercussions for that." "No, it isn't anything like that. This professor, Sparko is his name. He has trained many for a team called the Pretenders since the Aryan crisis. They travel all over the galaxy keeping world safe from rebels. Professor Sparko was trying to recruit people. He spoke about the mission of the Pretenders and said that the effort is in need of some to grow food on the space stations. I think joining this would be good for Say." Say stood, unnoticed in the doorway, and watched as Viv handed Dex a disc. Dex slid the foreign, technologically advanced item back to Viv, but she slid it back. "Listen." Viv pressed her orange thumb on the disc, and a hologram popped up. In front of the both of them. Say had seen nothing like this. Even Dex was startled, spitting out some of his gruel. The individual who appeared in the hologram did not appear foreign. He looked like an elder brave, with long whiskers and a long woolen coat. "He doesn't really look like that," whispered Viv. "The Sistis look like something you'd pick off a leaf. That's pretending what he's doing right there." "Greetings, Tutu. I am Professor Sparko. For the past 40 years, space travel has become more and more dangerous since rebellion and a new tyrannical order went global on planet Ares. This has spread, leading to piracy and invasions, both overt and covert. It is those covert invasions that I am set to foil. The Aryans have mastered the art of pretending, or disguising themselves as another species or race in order to infiltrate and destroy the ways of life and rebuild it in their own image of reality. By perfecting the art of pretense, I have organized teams of individuals from various planets to foil these Aryans at their game and restore order. This is done by tracking activity of pirates in active combat, spying on those pretending on various planets, or by helping to support and provide for the needs of our force, which has expanded from several Aryan refugees and vigilante allies to 3 main bases. The Aryans will not stop unless we force them to. Do never be so sure that your home planet will never suffer invasion. For all you know, it may already have been. This is why I need your help, your fire and potential. Your planet needs you to join the Pretenders." Dex folded his arms and shook his head. He did not buy it. "It sounds like he is fear-mongering," Dex said to Viv. "You should not believe all who claim to be righteous fighters. This professor needs to seek another breadbasket, not Tupek. And to stop taking advantage of gullible and impressionable nymphs like you. You are needed and belong here." Say, however, did not hear Dex, only Professor Sparko. She knew she did not belong in Tupek, and her eyes widened, reflecting the backdrop of outer space behind the professor in the presentation. For once, she was awestruck and inspired.